So here we are, not for the first time in the last 3 years, asking whether John Boehner will be able to survive putting on the House floor a bill that the Tea Party will hate. And here we are asking yet again whether even House Republicans who in their hearts would like to vote for that bill will decide it's in their political self-interest to vote no anyway. This is the story that led us to this moment tonight, 26 hours from a default deadline. It's the story that led us into this shutdown. It's the story that has taken us from one pointless, one destructive, one maddening episode of brinkmanship to another ever since Republicans gained control of the House. It's the story of why a sophomore Republican House member with no leadership position, with no legislative accomplishments, named Tim Huelskamp, why he can threaten, as he did today, his fellow Republicans with primary challenges, and why those fellow Republicans will take him seriously. And to understand all of this, to make sense of what seems to be an endless string of moments like this, all you really have to do is go back to one specific night, 3 years ago. It's the evening of September 14th, 2010, in the state of Delaware.
Christine O'Donnell, virtually unknown just a few weeks ago, but this morning she is officially the GOP's candidate for the Senate seat vacated by Vice President Joe Biden.
O'Donnell defeated 9-term Representative Mike Castle in Delaware's Republican Senate primary. She's now the 6th Tea Party candidate to win a primary race this year.
And I really think that day and that race is the root of everything we're living through right now, of the political stalemate that has basically defined Washington for the last few years and that promises to do so all the way through the end of Barack Obama's presidency at least. That Delaware Senate race explains it all. It explains the basic nature of the Tea Party movement. It's a conservative uprising that began when Barack Obama became president, but it's an uprising that wasn't just directed at Obama and the Democrats. It's an uprising that was also aimed at Republicans. It's because of how the conservative base, how the Tea Party chose to explain Obama's election in 2008. They couldn't tell themselves that their ideology had been repudiated by the rest of the country, that Americans had rejected conservatism and embraced a left-of-center philosophy. So instead, they came up with a story that blamed George W. Bush and that blamed the Republicans in Washington who had supported him. And they're telling Bush had betrayed the conservative cause as president. He'd spent too much money, he'd attacked government too little, he'd bailed out the banks. He'd given conservatism a bad name, which left voters in 2008 desperately searching for a new direction, which led them to Obama. That's how the Tea Party retroactively assessed the Bush years, how it explained Obama's victory. And it's how the Tea Party became something of a purification movement, to cleanse the party of all the sellouts who'd helped Bush, the sellouts who'd spoiled conservatism, who'd helped elect Obama. And Mike Castle, the guy who lost to Christine O'Donnell in that primary, was a textbook example of that kind of Republican. He'd been in Washington for 18 years. He'd been in politics a lot longer. He was a moderate Republican. He'd worked with Democrats. He'd voted for No Child Left Behind, the Medicare prescription drug plan. He'd voted for TARP. Mike Castle was exactly the kind of Republican the Tea Party rose up to fight. The 2010 Delaware Senate primary also explains the depth of the base's desire to purge Republicans like Castle. Here he was a former lieutenant governor, a former governor, an 8-term congressman from the state's lone district. He was impeccably credentialed. And he was opposed by a gadfly with no name recognition, no money, no experience, and some incredible, obvious political baggage.
I'm not a witch. I'm nothing you've heard. I'm you. None of us are perfect, but none of us can be happy with what we see all around us. I'll go to Washington and do what you'd do. I'm Christine O'Donnell, and I approve this message.
And that gadfly candidate who had to pay money to tell people she wasn't a witch, she won the primary. O'Donnell's victory showed that as far as the base was concerned, literally anyone was better than someone like Mike Castle, who had experience and money in the endorsement of the Republican Party.
The last several weeks have been spirited, shall we say, and the voters in the Republican primary have spoken, and I respect that decision. I would like to thank the Republican Party for its support. I had a very nice speech prepared here, hoping I would win this race.
The primary also explains how little the Tea Party cares about actually winning elections. Outside of the GOP base, Castle was immensely popular in Delaware. He was a general election shoe, and it was a guaranteed Senate seat pickup for the GOP. And O'Donnell was a guaranteed loser, a fringe, far-right figure in a blue state. This was obvious on primary day, but the base picked O'Donnell anyway. And of course, she was crushed in November, and Democrats won a Senate race that they were otherwise going to lose. And that whole story, how Castle was targeted, how Castle was beaten, whom Castle was beaten by, that story is the Rosetta Stone of Tea Party-era politics. If you understand what happened to him, why it happened to him, then you understand everything that's going on in Washington since then, and why we're stuck in a shutdown, and why we're staring down the barrel of a debt default right now. Because the story of Mike Castle and Christine O'Donnell sums up the threat that every Republican member of Congress lives with every day. If they're judged to be insufficiently conservative, if they're judged to be disloyal to the cause, disloyal to the tribe, if they give even an inch of space on their right, then they could become the Tea Party's next target. And if the Tea Party targets you in a Republican primary, they can beat you with literally anybody. That's the lesson of Delaware. That's the lesson that lives in the office of every Republican member of Congress. September 14th, 2010, we're still living with what happened that day. And as long as we are, there's no obvious way out of the mess that is Washington these days. That does it for us tonight. Rachel will be back here tomorrow night. And remember, you can see my show up weekend mornings at 8 Eastern. Now it is time for The Last Word with Lawrence O'Donnell. Have a great night.
The Rachel Maddow Show, weeknights at 9 Eastern on MSNBC.